Hello, everyone. Good day to everyone who's in the webinar today. Um, so today, Mr. Joe Kaperick would be going through our Putting the East in Greece webinar. Um, and very thankful for Mr. Joe for this. And if you go to the next slide, yes, so this is a webinar by ALIA. ALIA represents the combined interest of the Asian lubricants industry, not only the manufacturers, to help members grow their needs and moving the Asian lubricants industry forward together. So we're the voice of the Asian lubricants industry. Yep. So Mr. Joe Kaperick is from Upton Chemical Corporation. He is the senior R&D advisor. He started his career back in 1991 as an analytical chemist. So he's a chemist by education, obviously. Joe is, of course, also an immediate past president of NLGI and is a certified lubrication grease specialist by NLGI. So definitely, Joe is one of our experts in the industry when it comes to greases. So please, let's all welcome Mr. Joe Kaperi for this very informative knowledge sharing that he will be conducting on NLGI's high performance multi-use grease certification. Take it away, Joe. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Joe Kaperick with Afton Chemical Corporation. Today I'll be speaking to you on the behalf of the NLGI, the National Lubricating Grease Institute in North America, and talking about high-performance multi-use grease specification, HPM for short. This new specification, and give you some background on it and hopefully answer some questions and give you a better understanding. So thank you for your interest. And thank you to the organizers for inviting us here to talk about this. So start with a little bit of background, kind of some global trends and development overview of the specification itself, and then dig into some of the details of the specification. The spec has been finalized for the most part. And we'll talk about some of those details, and then kind of where we are at in the process now, the current status on licensing and all the rest of the details around that. And then we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have at the end of this. So in general, just talking about global grease trends, the NLGI does a production survey every year, and this is a voluntary survey of grease manufacturers to understand how much grease is being produced each year and to look at overall trends from year to year. So the most recent data is just now available, actually, at the middle of June, and that data does show a dip, as we would have expected from last year. During the pandemic, obviously, we saw a lot of things change and a lot of decline in production, but I don't think it was actually nearly as bad as we might have expected at the beginning of last year. So certainly, overall, production was down about 6.8% comparative, and that comparative is comparing to people who have reported in each of those previous 3 years. Overall, though, there's about an 8.5% total decline of reported production, and what we think that means is that some people aren't reporting, did not report data because of other concerns or whatever for last year, but that we understand that overall decline, why that happened, and hopefully we assume that that's going to come back up as things get somewhat back to normal this year. We also do see a decline in lithium. So lithium greases in general have been declining slowly as a percentage of the whole. But actually did not see much of a decline as a percentage of the whole. So some decline, but that decline was in a similar ratio to the overall decline for last year. But some of the reasons for the switch from lithium to other thickeners are things like the increasing difficulty of finding lithium because of competition with batteries. So that leads to some price spikes in different regions, different times. And also there's some recent regulatory concerns in REACH labeling around lithium hydroxide. So that may also start to push or continue to push people away from lithium. But overall, still lithium is roughly 70% of the global market. So certainly it's still the majority of grease is made that way. But we do see a growth in alternative thickeners, and the rest of the details of the production survey are now available on the NLGI website for members. That's a free benefit that we offer to members, so certainly if you are an NLGI member, go look that up and you can get the rest of the details there. Overall, we see in the market a growing need for higher performing greases. So as we continue to see equipment evolve, the lubrication needs evolve as well. So you've got increasingly harsher conditions, so higher temperatures, higher loads. You continue to see a higher power density footprint for many of these machines and equipment as they continue to evolve to do more with less. Obviously, there's also a continued push for extended service intervals. Everybody wants to see their greases and their oils last longer. And there's more continued push, I guess, for sealed for life type bearings. Also, you see things like wind and EVs requiring or looking for reduced noise. And some of that could be put on to lubrication. Key application areas seem to be wind energy and automotive electrification, and additionally mining and agricultural in general. So those are kind of overall global grease trends. What about the impact of those trends then on grease formulation in general? So more specifically, you see these are the trends we see. What do we see the impact on us who make grease or work in the grease industry? So the lithium price increase and regulatory concerns, that makes lithium less attractive overall, and I think that's what drives some of the use of alternative thickeners. And you see lithium is not the best grease thickener out there, but it is the best for value. So as the value starts to decline because the price of lithium goes up or there are more regulatory concerns around it, then that starts to make other alternative thickeners that might be better quality but higher cost, it makes them more attractive. You do see that growing need for higher performing greases. That means that people are more likely to look at the thickener selection for performance improvements. So if you have a higher performing piece of equipment that needs better lubrication, perhaps you're willing to spend a little bit more on the thickener or on the grease to lubricate it, and therefore get better performance from that grease overall. Extended life puts also pressure then on component chemistry for additives for better flexibility, for better oxidation performance, for better high temperature performance to help with that extended life. Noise reduction for things like EVs, with no internal combustion engine, the noise of the bearings and other things within the electric cars are going to be more important because you're going to hear those more. You wouldn't have heard those in the past, but with the combustion engine gone, you now have more concern about that. So thickener selection and processing become bigger concerns there. And then the key application areas, we see things like fretting wear in wind turbines. So as you have these newer technologies like wind turbines and EV, you're going to need solutions for specific needs that come up that people weren't aware of or didn't think about 10 or 20 years ago. So new technology for the automotive electrification, we don't really understand fully what the needs are going to be there. They don't have a lot of standards or specifications yet for those areas, and so we're going to have to see how that pans out. But that all kind of leads into this new generation specification from NLGI, the HPM specification, because of these increased needs and higher performance needs from greases. That's what kind of induced NLGI to take on this area in the first place. So if we look at the high performance multi-use grease specification, again HPM for short, Our overall goal was to define these new specification categories for higher performance for the market. So, and increase the communication between the end user and the grease marketer or manufacturer. So try and understand the needs of the market and come up with specifications that would allow good communication to allow a grease manufacturer to tell or communicate to the end user what that grease was capable of doing, and also give some assurance around its performance. So to do that, we defined greases with a core HPM specification and then subcategories for enhanced performance in different areas. And we'll talk about each of these areas. Water resistance, high load carrying capacity, saltwater corrosion resistance, low temperature performance, and potentially high temperature or long life. And those are still under discussion. I'll talk more about those in a little bit. But each of these enhanced categories has to also meet the core HPM performance as well. So the idea overall here again is to be able to then talk to an end user who perhaps has needs for saltwater corrosion resistance for a lubrication aspect, and be able to then show him the enhanced performance and kind of certify or assure that performance through NLGI's specification. So historically, NLGI specifications, in 1966, there were some initial discussions between NLGI, ASTM, which is the standards body, and SAE, the Society of Automotive Engineers. They all essentially got together in 1966 to talk about the needs for the automotive industry for defining specifications around lubricating greases. In 1989, 23 years later, they published the ASTM standard D4950, which outlines the specifications and classifications for those service greases for chassis and wheel bearing greases. And that's what we kind of call today the GCLB specification. In 2015, we looked at GCLB. This is the only set of specifications that NLGI had to this point, and we see still hugely popular, even though almost none of the automotive industry is actually still using GCLB as a specification for automotive greases. The industry and manufacturers tend to look at these greases as a sign of premium performance. So it has an NLGI stamp on it, and it's certified against certain standards, but so it's obviously very popular. But when we looked at that, we said, look, it has to evolve. We need to raise that performance level to meet the performance levels of the higher performing equipment and some of the trends that we talked about earlier. So in 2019, we decided to move forward with a proposal for these new set of specifications that would be in parallel to the existing automotive specifications, so in parallel to GCLB, not to replace them, but to supplement and to increase the quality. 2020, we introduced those new specifications and opened up our process for licensing and certification of products. So we really tried to put a push on this and not take another 23 years to come up with a new set of specifications, and I think we've been very successful with that. And really engage the industry in helping us to understand what those specs should look like and help define them. All right, so just as kind of an overview, again, we've got the high performance multi-use core spec that we'll talk about. And then on top of that, you can claim enhanced performance in one or more of 4 different areas. So each of those areas we'll talk about separately, but this enhanced corrosion resistance, enhanced low temperature, enhanced water resistance, and enhanced high load carrying capacity. Those are each on top of the high performance core performance. In some cases, we've just pushed the performance level in a certain bench test maybe higher. In other areas, we've added additional tests. And again, you can, for a particular application, if you see a market need, you could claim one or more of these enhanced tags on a specific grease. All right, so the core specification itself, really, this is the core spec right here, and we have the same penetration limits ranges from range from an NLGI 1 to a range number 3. Rust protection, we've got both the static bearing test and the dynamic bearing test. We've included and kept the 4-ball wear and 4-ball weld testing. Added the oxidative stability test, the D942, the pressurized vessel. Copper corrosion is included. We have a elastomer that is an ISO material, NBR material, specified by ISO 13226, and that's going to be included for 168 hours at 125 degrees C. And these, all of these specifications came from discussion with industry stakeholders, with manufacturers, with OEMs, with partners within NLGI to come up with these tests and these limits. Included for stability, we look at prolonged work penetration, water washout, high temperature bleed, roll stability, oil separation, and then low temperature torque with a ball bearing. So this is the core performance meant to define a high quality multi-use grease. So it's not going to be the best grease out there, but it should be a high quality to meet specific applicable, to meet that level of quality for a specified application. Now, if we look at how this compares to GCLB, I've tried to kind of highlight areas where we have the HPM core tests, and you can see in some of these areas we've kept to the same limits, so the wear is the same, but the weld is increased. We think 250 weld should be fairly easy to meet and should be a minimum standard for a high performance grease. We have left out things like LWI, fretting protection, dropping point, and high temp life, which we don't think were needed for a multi-use grease, but some of these may be included in some of the enhanced performance tags. Oxidative stability is included with the pressure vessel, and copper corrosion. Both of these were not included in GCLB. The elastomers we talked a little bit about. Elastomers in general, these are the elastomers that were chosen because of the automotive industry. We believe the NBR ISO material here will be more readily available, is not going to be changed as frequently as the automotive industry seemed to change the materials we use in GCLB. We also wanted to add stability testing like the prolonged work penetration. Water washout, we wanted to increase the severity of that specification there. High temperature bleed is included, and roll stability is included, which were not in GCLB. The limit for oil separation is reduced slightly, and leakage is not included in the HPM core. For low temperature, we do have, we wanted to include the low temp torque ball bearing for this, whereas GCLB uses the low temp torque test with the tapered bearing. So this is on automotive use. We believe this is going to be more for multi-use. So that's kind of a little bit of the reasoning behind some of those tests and why we made them different. If we look at each of the enhanced tags, so again, HPM core, if you're going to claim an enhanced tag, such as corrosion resistance, you still need to meet all of the HPM core tests, and then the enhanced category is going to include, in this case, the static bearing test, but with 10% synthetic seawater. That needs to pass, and then 2 different saltwater solutions for the M-core test. And this is 100% synthetic seawater and 0.5 normal sodium chloride solution. And in these cases, you'll see these are always run in duplicate, and to include, so in this case we have a 1,2. That means you could have one bearing that's rated a 2, but the other one must be a 1 or better. And the same thing here, we have a 2,3. So those are the enhanced performance needed from a corrosion resistance, for a corrosion resistance enhanced tag, and that is again on top of the HPM core. If we look at the high load, this obviously focuses then on some of the EP type testing and wear testing. We've lowered the wear specification from 0.6 to 0.5. The 4-ball weld is increased to 400. And we've included 3 new tests here. In this case, the SRV step load, that's ASTM D5706, and that's at a level of 800 for a pass. 5 milligrams of weight loss in a duplicate testing of D4170. So D4170 right now has some industry issues. We're working on those issues and trying to increase or improve the repeatability of that test in general. But for now, it's included in the spec at 5 milligrams, and that is the average, again, of 2 runs. So 2 runs are required. We've also included a new test here, the fretting wear scar by SRV, and this is ASTM D7594, and that is a 0.5 maximum for that wear scar. So again, those are the enhanced categories needed on top of the HPM core for the high load carrying capacity tag. For water resistance, on top of the HPM core, we've included a more severe water washout specification limit of 5. The water spray-off test is included with 40% maximum, and the wet roll stability is included here with a plus or minus 15%. So those, again, are enhanced performance category tests for the water resistance performance tag. And for low temperature, we've included 3 low temperature tests on top of the core testing, and this is the low temp ball bearing at minus 30 instead of minus 20. So the core testing requires minus 20. For the low temperature, we require minus 30, but the same limits at minus 30. We've also included the US Steel mobility test at minus 20. And that's a flow mobility test, and that's going to be a minimum of 10 grams per minute. And the low temperature flow Kesternick test at minus 30, and that needs to be at maximum of 1400 millibars. So that, again, is the enhanced performance for the low temperature category. All right, so we did do this pretty much in record time for NLGI. We got this out there in a little over a year and a half, I'd say, and this is pretty much in the middle of a pandemic and everything else. This was great work by all of the stakeholders in the industry. These are NLGI members, these are OEMs, these are grease manufacturers and marketers, additive suppliers, equipment makers. Everybody had we went through a pretty intensive interview process, had meetings to pull people together to understand their needs and their concerns, and out of all of that, in December of 2020, we were able to launch this specification. So NLGI is working with the Center for Quality Assurance, CQA, to help administer this program. This is a little bit different from GCLB in that there is more actual testing and certification of samples to help assure the quality of the greases that are using the HPM label. The website is now live. We've got the website included here. I'm sure these slides will be available. But I'll also show you on the NLGI website how to access that if you'd like. CQA will collect samples, and they will carry out testing as part of the certification and audit program to help support HPM. So currently, our implementation, we have 9 qualification samples have been received. We have 5 are in the testing phase, and we have our first HPM certified product just as of last week, I believe. I don't think that has been announced yet who has that product, but I'm sure that will be forthcoming in the near future. We estimate probably 15 to 20 HPM products will be registered by this coming fall, and I assume that those early adopters then will be advertising out in the marketplace, and that may drive others to help, but also we want to see some of the OEMs adopt then these specifications to better help them communicate their needs to the industry. There is a pretty extensive FAQ, frequently asked questions. There's a collection on the CQA website, and this is all available to the public. But a lot of the questions that you may have, there's some ready answers there already. And we also have, over the last year, we started last fall, I guess, and carried this on through the spring, a webinar series that focuses on the individual tests that are included in the HPM spec. So these webinars are now available on the NLGI website in the members only area. And you can access those webinars at your leisure. If you have questions, or if you have new people in the lab that are not sure on how to run a test and wanted some additional information, that's a great place to get that information. As I said, the certification process, CQA, is helping us with this, but basically registering the product, you submit the application paperwork along with product data, so showing a set of data showing that your formulation meets the HPM spec, and then you would submit a sample for confirmation testing by CQA, and then submit the licensing agreement and payment to them, and they will take care of the rest of that paperwork. So that's all pretty much available on the CQA website, all of the steps on how to do that. This is just kind of a big picture overview of that. But the CQA website will have all that additional information on there. So trademarks, HPM will be trademarked initially in 11 different countries and regions around the world. These approvals, we believe we're going to have most of those approvals, and by this fall, some of them take longer, so they may stretch out a little bit into 2022. But you can see we've got a wide swath covered here globally to get those that HPM trademark out there. So we do have more information, as I said, on the NLGI website, so nlgi.org. There is a whole site on there, a whole area set up for high-performance multi-use grease specification. If you go to that site, you will get information on the webinars. So you'll see all of those archived webinars that we talked about, and webinars such as this one will be archived on there. So you can see some of the previous conversations that we've had around the specification as well, if you're interested there. The specification itself, so the details and the testing that I just talked about today. I think there's also a list of some test labs that are available to run those tests if you don't have them in your own lab. And the most recent specification details are included on there as well. You'll see historical information, so press releases, articles in various trade magazines, marketing information, some of the timeline and background that I've showed here today. Some of that kind of information is all available under here. And then the certification and application process. So this is a direct link to the Center for Quality Assurance website, where you can get additional information, register your products, get any questions answered about that process there. We would also encourage you we're happy to help you with promotional ideas. So if you want to talk about HPM with your customers, if you want to talk about it with your employees internally, we have a lot of promotional material to help with that, to help you create webinars, to help with marketing materials and standards and distribution. So all of that information is also available under marketing information on the website, as I just pointed out, and we would be happy to help you with that as well. If you want to reach out to us at headquarters if you have any additional information or any additional questions. So future plans. Phase 2, the steering committee has already been formed, and this Phase 2 is going to be focused around the high temperature and long life categories that I talked about. So we recognize that there are not sufficient tests for our comfort level today. So basically missing from this is a high temperature rig test that is reasonably affordable for laboratories wishing to carry out those tests and has good reproducibility. Also, there's a lot of discussion right now on high temperature versus long life, and I think we are leaning towards two separate specifications there, one for high temperature, one for long life. Those are probably two different categories. But that steering committee has been formed and is having these conversations, and we expect probably 2 to 5 years before we will have those enhanced category specifications published. But we will continue to update the industry and keep you posted on that. We're continuing to work with ASTM to refine the testing and reproducibility issues that we see with things like the fretting wear test. We continue to work very closely. There's a lot of NLGI ASTM overlap and a lot of members working on both of those and working on those issues. We'll continue to update the specifications as we get new improved testing capabilities, maybe new test rigs, maybe we find issues with the current ones that we can fix. We want this specification to be a living document. We don't want it to be updated every 40 years and not reflect changes in the environment. We have a lot of active involvement from NLGI and our industry partners in steering this, and we really appreciate feedback from yourselves. We appreciate understanding what end users are looking for, what maybe any criticisms that you have or suggestions for continuing to improve this. We would be happy to hear that. It would be good to get feedback from yourselves. What you think about this, how useful you think it may be, and what might make it more useful. So with that, I think we are going to move to the question and answer portion. I'd be happy to answer those questions. I think they'll tell you how to put those in, but I believe there's a Q&A tab that you can enter questions in or raise your hand. But if you have questions afterwards, this is the contact information for myself, for Chuck Coe, who was a big part of helping to put all this together, for the NLGI headquarters, and for Mike Kunselman, who is our main contact and protagonist at the Center for Quality Assurance. So he's also going to be very helpful in answering any questions on that licensing process. So with that, I will say thank you very much for this opportunity, and be happy to entertain questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Joe. So again, I would like to remind everyone, if you want to ask questions, there is a Q&A chat box. Please do so. Or if you want to directly ask Joe, you can also raise your hands so you can check the questions that you have. Yes, we have the first question, Joe. Are costing details for certification also available in the NLGA website?
Yes, thanks, May, and again, thanks for the opportunity. The costing details are pretty well being handled by CQA, so that's the Center for Quality Assurance, and the link for CQA and the whole registration is available on the NLGI website. That will take you to the CQA website, and since they are overseeing the certification and the auditing of the whole process, there's a lot of factors that go into what the cost will be, depending on what tags you want, and what your product is. You would need to look at their details and talk to them about it. They're quite open, happy to discuss these things with you, and any questions that you might have about it.
Okay, thanks, Joe. And the lead time is also included in there, in terms of the lead time for the testing and certification.
Yeah, it will depend. So initially, you should submit. You're going to need to submit the paperwork and an initial set of data against whichever of the specifications you would like to claim. And then submit an actual sample and go through the process with CQA. There will be some delay as that sample then gets tested and questions come up or additional details are needed. So it's probably several months from start to finish, but it will depend on the product itself and the testing and how that goes out.
Okay, thanks, you. And we have a question from Miss Vicky. So she's asking, can you give us some idea? Is it volume based? Yes, that's the question.
So the cost, I don't believe is, and I think Chuck would probably have a better idea of this if he's able to chime in here, but I don't think the volume of the product is a basic cost.
It is not volume based. It's based on what certification you would like to hold, HPM, or what additional tags, whether or not you are an NLGI member. Those are the things it's based on, not volume.
Then I believe there's also if you're rebranding or if you're rebranding something that's already been approved, you also get there'd be a lower
Yes.
lower cost.
Yep.
So it can get kind of complicated, and certainly, I think talking directly to CQA about your specific application and what your situation is and what product details are, I think that would be the best approach.
But it's fairly clear if you go via the NLGI website and say, I want to register a product, it links you to CQA, and there is a bunch of Q&As, and you can ask about pricing and get a pretty good picture from there. Although, quite honestly, today the link was not working, but hopefully that's repaired by now. So you can click on there and see what the pricing is for members, non-members, products, branded products, and rebrands.
And I think we have the details, the contact details available with this webinar, and certainly I'm happy to point anybody in the right direction to a direct email address or to the website itself.
Right.
I have a question as well, Joe and Chuck. So there are a series of claims that the manufacturer can actually tell to their customers, isn't it? So it can be that the product is certified just for the HPM core, or let's say they can also have the HPM core plus enhanced salt water corrosion resistance. Is it really the discretion of the one who is requesting for certification to choose which tag in terms of which claim? It need not be for all of the water resistance, water corrosion, low temperature, and high load carrying. The reason why I'm asking is, for instance, here in our region in Asia, low temperature property is not really in most countries is not really sensitive, isn't it? It's not a key issue. So I would assume that if, let's say, Singapore were to sell just within the region, then they would not want to do the low temperature testing. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you can register a product for HPM or any combination of the enhancements. Probably we're seeing a fair bit of right now is HPM and HPM plus high load. We will see a lot of HPM and high load and water resistance, but you're right. Low temperature probably doesn't make a lot of sense for much of Asia, especially Southeastern Asia. So you don't have to opt for all. You can opt for no tags or one or two, all in the same product.
Okay, cool.
And I think that also kind of leads to the strategy that why HPM? Why do you want to put HPM tag on your product? And I mean, the first piece is to communicate to your end users what it is that your grease is capable of doing. So an HPM core tag, or just meeting the core specification, gives a certain level of performance that you can then tell your customer this level of performance is available and it's certified through NLGI. If in that communication your end user has more need for rust inhibition or more need for high load, or for both of those, you may choose then to say, okay, I'm going to need to get both tags on this for rust inhibition and high load. The problem that you may run into is actually getting a grease that meets both of those. There's nothing in the HPM specification that says you can't have all four tags and the core on one particular grease. But from a formulating standpoint, that might be difficult to do. Mm-hmm. So it might be difficult to have something that meets high load and still, can protect against corrosion and meet low temperature. That can be a difficult kind of combination to do. So, but it's up to the application then, and ultimately, I hope that we'll have equipment manufacturers, OEMs, manufacturers saying, "Look, for this application, I need this." So maybe there is a need out there that meeting all four tags would be great if they could do that. That presents a challenge then to the grease formulator, to be able to meet that need. And really, it's all about the conversation. It's about talking about what your grease can do and having that conversation with the end users.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really an important message, Joe, in terms of it's not easy to meet all enhancement in one formulation. So it'll be tricky. Okay, that's really good. And then let's say for we've got certified for HPM and we want to certify to a new more additional tag, then we can just resend the samples and have it retested, isn't it? For
Yes,
addition, yeah. Okay.
you can always add performance tags to an existing product. If you have a product registered as HPM plus HL, you can come back 6 months later with the proper data and add water resistance to the same product, for instance.
Okay, good. Thank you. We have another question. In terms of, so once, let's say, we have a product certified, do you actually check do you do sampling in the market, for the specific product that you have certified to check if what has been submitted for the samples are actually reflective of what's being sold in the market?
Well, we do have an audit program. We're not specifically going out into the marketplace and getting samples of products. We require every company that has certified products to, so to speak, recertify every year. They must pass an audit and submit an audit sample to have it rechecked against key tests to ensure that it still meets the requirements. And that's an annual requirement.
Okay. But the NLGI itself wouldn't really go for sampling in that, let's say, in Indonesia or Thailand. It would be the one who actually registered for certification who would be giving the samples.
They provide the sample, yes, but NLGI and actually CQA handles the testing of it. The current program with the GCLB program allows the holder of a certification to submit data and say our product still meets the requirements, which is not maybe the most strenuous, is that the right word, strenuous certification requirements. Now we require you to send in the sample and we will retest it within the auspices of NLGI and CQA to make sure that it still meets the requirements.
Okay, yep, thanks. We have another question from Miss Vicky. Chuck and Joe, can you comment on specific grease needs for hybrid and EV? Is HPM core sufficient?
That's a great question, Joe. We can both kick in on that.
Sure.
Depending on how familiar you are with electric vehicles, the requirements, the grease requirements for electric vehicles are definitely still evolving, and different designs appear to have different requirements. I would say that the HPM certification is a great start, but there will most likely be requirements on top of that by the original equipment manufacturers that say, in addition to a performance level of NLGI's HPM certification, I also want a certain level of quietness or an additional level of antioxidancy or what have you on top of it. So I would say that HPM itself does not say that grease is suitable for all the EV vehicle applications. We can't say that.
Right, and I would say, just to kind of reiterate that, this is about a communication of a level of performance. So this is not NLGI's recommending any particular grease for any particular application. That still needs to be decided between the manufacturer or the supplier and the end user. So that is not the part of the conversation that we're having. We are helping to have that conversation by saying, here's the level of performance that's specified by HPM. It's up to you as a end user or you as a manufacturer to say, this should be sufficient for your needs. Additionally, I would say that one of the things we've talked about through this process is potentially another tag, which would be around something like electric motor bearing greases. We haven't gotten that far yet to say that's something we're going to roll out next year. It would be several years down the road. But I could see as the EV market continues to grow and people kind of settle on what the real needs of electric motor bearings in EVs is, you could see a specification tag potentially around that as well.
Okay, thanks, Joe and Chuck. Another question is, can we actually access testing services for general testing requirement before we go through the certification process of in NLGI? Is this possible to use CQA as a testing facility?
NLGI doesn't certainly do any testing itself. We don't have that capability. But on our website, I believe it's been loaded onto the website. We have a list of labs around the world that have the capability to perform some or all of the certification tests. So you should be able to access that and say, all right, here's a lab in my part of the world where I can get most of the tests done. Maybe I need to then send to somewhere else for a couple of the tests if I can't perform them in-house. So that guidance will be, if it's not already available, on the website.
Okay.
Exactly, and I do think we have a list at least of some of those tests available.
All right. Thanks, Chuck and Joe. Let's see. We don't have. Is there any more questions? You can actually ask Joe and Chuck directly. Here. Can you comment on how base oil requirements will evolve with HPM and the future specs you are developing? From Miss Vicky.
I'd say from the formulating side, if I understand what you're asking, is there are no requirements for the base oil. There's no requirements for the additives or the grease thickener for that matter. So really the performance level is around the grease itself and how you choose to get there and meet that performance level that then is able to meet the targets of the specification. It is completely up to you. So there is no chemical or additive or base oil requirement at all. What's going to happen is you're going to find, I think, that certain types of thickeners may be more common, may be more economical, maybe better in certain cases to do certain things performance-wise, and I think that's where the evolution might be. But I don't think specifically that's going to impact base oils. It's just a matter of how you are able to use those base oils or the thickeners or the additives to meet the spec.
I agree, Joe. I think there are certainly some indications that if you really want to have not only HPM certification, but maybe several of the performance tags on top of it, it may drive you towards a synthetic base oil. But I don't think that HPM specifications are going to drive any developments in base oil. I think it's going to maybe impact the formulators' work to choose the base oils to do the job they want.
Yeah, you could certainly see some applications like potentially a future high temperature specification or the low temperature specification where combinations of synthetics and polymers may be needed to meet those. But if you as a formulator are able to do that without using a synthetic or without using a polymer, that's entirely up to you.
Right.
It's not going to impact whether or not you get the certification.
So what you're saying, Joe and Chuck, is basically it's up to the creativeness of the formulators on how they would optimize their formulation to meet the specification. So there is no specific requirement in terms of what type of base oils or additives or thickeners are actually required. So it's the formulators, yeah. Okay.
That's a very good point, May, and that's something we should emphasize even more, is that, and I believe Joe mentioned it, this is a performance specification. We do not specify chemically the additive requirement. We do not specify the type of thickener required, or the type of base oil, or even the viscosity of the base oil. It's up to the formulator to put together their particular formulation that meets the requirements without formulation requirements. It's performance requirements.
Okay, good. I think that gives flexibility, isn't it, for the formulators?
Yes.
I have one more question. You mentioned earlier that right now there are no OEM specs yet that specifies the use of HPM. Yeah, but is there current work or any collaboration plan with the OEMs in terms of getting some specification requirement on the use of HPM or the enhanced properties that they would like to be used in their equipment? Is there a plan to do this?
So this was part of the whole process, really, of getting to the point where we're at today, is getting all of those stakeholders as part of the conversation. Chuck has been instrumental in a lot of the conversations with OEMs, with manufacturers, with everyone who has an interest in these specifications. We certainly still have many of those OEMs as part of that conversation, and I think they've already seen the value of that. It's not going to be an overnight adoption of these specifications, but I think as they see the value, as more formulators see and marketers see the value of the specification in that conversation, I think you're going to see that. They certainly have been involved in getting the specifications to where they are today.
Yep. Joe, it'll probably end up kind of similar to what we have today with the GCLB certification. There are a lot of OEMs that specify GCLB, but it's a minimum requirement. They have their own specifications that build on top of it. And that's what we hope and expect with HPM. It's not going to solve everybody's requirements, but it's a good platform and a starting point for a really high quality, high performance multi-use grease. And then OEMs can then build on top of it for their specific requirements for their equipment, and add tests and requirements on top of the HPM.
If we can cover 80% or 90% of their requirements, that's great.
Yeah.
And then maybe an automotive manufacturer has a special seal material and a field trial that they require for their grease. Maybe a wind turbine manufacturer needs some additional testing that they want for their paint compatibility or something else. So there's a lot of different things we can help get them to maybe 80% of the way to their final requirements, but then it becomes an individual, and you can't put one specification around all of those different applications. But we can certainly kind of help ease the way to get to there.
Right.
Right. And then just a comment from Miss Vicky. She agrees that not putting specification as part of the specifications, the components that must or must not be used. So just like what you said earlier, it's really the discretion of the formulators to come up with the optimized formulation to meet the performance specs.
Well, and that's a good example also, because if we were just talking about one application like automotive, yes, there might be more things that we could put in there that would be specific for automotive applications, but we really do want this to be for more general use. And in the case of automotive lubricants and the SAP limits, certainly that's a requirement that is needed for that industry, but there aren't any real specific requirements across the broad industry that greases are used in. So we wanted to make this as useful as possible for the greatest number of users as possible.
Right.
Okay. Maybe I will have a last call out in terms of questions. Are there any more questions you want to ask Joe and Chuck? Okay, gone. So yes, I think we're done. Thanks very much, Chuck and Joe, for your time, and it was really very informative. I learned a lot. So thanks again, and yes, and hopefully once you get into more specification, we can have another session, and we can update the ALIA member of the new things that are coming up from NLGI. Yes, and speaking of upcoming things, we have upcoming events that you can definitely check in our ALIA website. But this coming August 3, we'll have the metalworking fluids that will focus on field issues and some troubleshooting approach. And then, of course, we have the SLE ICML certification, which will start on August 23. And this is a 32 hours certificate prep for the certification course. And we will also have some sustainability focused discussion coming on August 31. And this will be Ninas who will be presenting. So again, if you want to get more details, please just check our website and you will see more of the events that are coming in the coming months and weeks. And again, I think what do we have in the next slide? I think we're done. Thanks very much again, Joe and Chuck, for your time and for this really good session. Again, to our participants, if you need more, if you have more questions, please do reach out to Joe. You've seen the details on how you can connect with him. So again, thanks everyone, especially for those people who are having public holidays today. Thanks again for joining. And have a good day, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.